How's it going, everybody? And welcome to the Barely There podcast. We are back. I'm Duke Coughlin. You can follow me at that pod guy Duke. As always, I'm joined by the Ayatollah of Capicola, the Swami of Salami, Lucas Perfetti. You can follow him at Lucas Perfetti 46. Be sure to follow the podcast on Twitter as well at Barely There Pod. Be sure to subscribe on Twitter, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast. Subscribe on YouTube goes a long way. You can drop in the comment section. We're going to have a big old draft special just like we did last year. A lot of fun. We're going to do it again. We're going to get a lot of people in here. We're going to live stream probably a good majority of the draft, if not the entire draft, considering me and Lucas are just complete degenerates who don't have anything better to do anyway. So, any support helps. We love getting involved with you guys. Been noticing the YouTube views popping up. Be sure to like and subscribe and shoot a comment if you like what you're hearing. Be sure to hit that little bell so you can always see when we're going live as well. Now that we have gotten all of that out of the way, Lucas Perfetti, we are finally covering the NFL draft. We are finally talking about players. You have been just absolutely devastating your meat as far as mock drafts go. You have even considered yourself the Swami of mock drafts as well as salami, as we've all seen in the past. Alaptasai, putting it just very bluntly, the Eric Cartman of the NFL draft, just genuine great, degenerate behavior. Lucas, how you feeling? How excited are you? And how's the weather? I don't know.
I mean, the weather's not great. The sun has been, I guess daylight savings, that helps. The sun's out a lot longer, which makes you feel more like a human being. But yeah, no, draft time's here. I'm pretty excited for it. I've had my eyes set on the draft for a while. Just free agency, like as much as we wanted money to be spent in different places, like we covered in the free agency episode, that's not how you build your team. And if there's one thing that I really like about Ryan Poles is his first draft, right? I thought sitting and picking, and I hope that's the strategy kind of for this year. Maybe not with the 9th overall pick, which we'll get into, but I think sticking and picking with those 2 second rounders at best player available, or what he thought was best player available, regardless of what the fan base wanted, what everyone thought we needed. He just went with the 2 best guys who I was really high on Gordon. You were really high on Brisker. Like we both thought that they can go in the first round, and we're going to kind of find out as we go through this show how much of a crapshoot the draft really is. I know it sounds cliche, but anything can happen on draft day. And especially the further you get into the draft, those 2nd, 3rd, 4th rounds, those people you saw going in mock drafts in the 7th round every single time that you thought the Bears were for sure going to get a starter, like those guys will come off the board a lot faster than you think because everyone has different values and evaluations across the league. But yeah, man, I'm excited to see what Ryan Poles is able to do with this draft. I mean, we're going to talk about a lot of different things, strategy, prospects. So where do you want to kick it off, buddy?
Well, I guess just kind of starting with Ryan Poles. Really, I guess I'm coming into this draft cycle just a little bit more confident in what he can do in the draft, just based on what he did in his first draft. Now, does that necessarily give him a pass if he just goes out there and drafts nothing but stinkers? Absolutely not. I don't think that's something people should use as far as an argument whenever anyone kind of criticizes any picks on draft day. But I do think Ryan Poles did show last year being able to maneuver throughout the later rounds of the draft, being able to move picks and still finding value in what you're getting back for as far as like trading down 3-4 spots, if not out of a round altogether, finding good value in players, kind of having a good valuation on some guys that he thinks are going to fall. And one thing that really kind of went with his mindset, especially with like the Brisker and Kyler Gordon pick when he explained it last year, was he has this idea that if there's a guy up there that he didn't think was going to fall that falls to that pick, and he thinks he's one of the better players in the draft and he's high on the board, he's not going to hesitate to grab that guy. And I really I like that attitude because I don't think that's used enough. I think some GMs get a little too fancy on trading back because they think somebody's going to be there, and then somebody moves a pick ahead of them and drafts the guy that they wanted. You know what I mean? So I do kind of like the aggressive nature as far as Poles, grabbing Brisker when he was sitting there, grabbing Kyler Gordon as he was sitting there, because he admitted those are 2 guys he did not think were going to be sitting at either of those 2nd round picks. Maybe he changed his draft strategy a little bit, But I am all about drafting the best player available. I think you have to do it within reason. Obviously, you need to be able to do it with a player that actually fits what you do need. But you cannot draft based solely on need. You know what I mean? If teams drafted based solely on need, Minnesota would have passed on Adrian Peterson. You know what I mean? Because they had Chester Taylor in the backfield. So like that's the type of situation where like you need to get the best player on the board. You know what I mean? And I think Poles has done it. Poles showed last year that he can maneuver the draft while still keeping that in mind and getting some good players on the roster.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that I like most strategy-wise about the first draft. And like I said, it could be a little bit different this year sitting at 9, and we'll talk about why. But he really grabbed what he thought was best player available. I know Bayless, there's some discrepancy there at 3rd, but then because those first 2 rounds, that's where you're going to have the highest likelihood to hit on like Pro Bowl, all-pro players, right? So sticking and picking there and just getting the best player available. And then with those later rounds, I think both of our 5th round picks, we traded way back in the 5th round, like 15 or 20 picks, and then accumulated a couple picks with them. That to me is a great strategy, because now it's like with those later round guys that you're, basing it off of maybe an undersized guy with a great motor and had a ton of production, but doesn't translate to the NFL on paper, or you're using it for the absolute athletic freak that played basketball for 3 years and then started playing football his senior year, or switch positions 4 times, right? Like the Dominique Robinson.
Yeah, like Dominique Robinson.
And you give yourself more chances to hit at those guys, right? Because you're going to have a lower hit rate in that 5th, 6th, 7th round. In the 7th round, it's so hard to fucking hit. You'll find some, rarely, if you go look through the drafts, you'll find maybe 1 or 2 guys that contribute in a way that like you'll remember their name in the 6th round. And then like 5th round, you get some dudes. So I do think having more chances in that 5th round is a great strategy, because there are some dudes that get to the 5th round. You'll notice like the trend of players that are, Pro Bowl caliber, all pro caliber players picking up. So that's something that I oh my God, I'm reading the comments. These guys are losers. But that's something that I really admired about the first draft. We'll see what happens this year, because we have pick number 9. We've already made 1 trade down, tried to maximize some value, got an extra 2nd round pick this year. But it's tough, because that number 9 pick, I feel like this first round, especially this top 10, is nowhere near as top heavy as in years past. There's been years where you have 8, 9, 10, 12 guys with a top 10 grade. This year, I feel like there's really, even including the quarterbacks, I think there's really only like 5 or 6 guys that would be top 10, in my opinion, where you'd want to take them. So trading down to 9 kind of puts you out of striking range, even if all of the quarterbacks go, which I don't think that's happening, right? Like Fields fell out of the top 10. So did fucking Mac Jones. I think they were both on paper better quarterbacks far and away than guys like Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. So I don't know. It's just the draft is there's so much that goes into it, but like 9, I do feel like is a tough pick to be at. I feel like you're going to be getting a position that not a lot of people expect or like.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. And I think you kind of hope the quarterback, situation heats up. I see all these NFL teams falling in love with a guy like Will Levis, who I think Will Levis, pretty big arm. There's definitely potential there, but I've yet to see this guy throw a tight spiral past 30 yards. And it's like, that's fucking concerning. Like, yes, he can heave it. Like, he has an arm, and maybe this is like me misreading, similar to how I misread a guy like Josh Allen, because I thought Josh Allen had a little bit of a similar situation, except Josh can still throw a tight spiral, even if it was a little inaccurate. Will Levis cannot throw a tight spiral past 30 yards, and it blows me away that he's hyped up as much as he is. But honestly, that bodes really well with where we're at right now. It helped us when we were in trade negotiations with teams, because, the fact that a guy like Will Levis is still up there, that kind of intrigues other teams about potentially moving up if that's a guy they fall in love with. And even in Anthony Richardson, like, man, like, I understand the hype behind Anthony Richardson, but like, people are I feel like people are already kind of labeling him with pro comparisons of a guy that he just never fully showed that he was in college. Like, there's talent there. Absolutely. We've seen what the high end talent is, and he has breakaway speed for his size. He's a freak of nature. There's no other way to put it. Like, he was gifted when he was born. You know what I mean? Like, that's something you just kind of get from birth. And when you work hard at it, you become what Anthony Richardson does. But like, we just have not seen enough of it on tape at Florida to show that this is a guy that I would spend that type of capital on. But it is nice because I do think with where we are with this 9th pick, and this kind of the segue into the point that I'm trying to get to here, it's a situation where I know a lot of people are falling in love with the Peter Skorinskis of the world and the Paris Johnsons of the world and everything like that. And I understand the need for an offensive tackle, but man, if a guy like Jalen Carter doesn't fall to 9, I just have a really hard time sticking at that pick, because I think you're going to be able to get more value trading back by having a team trade up to maybe grab one of those, Skorinsky or Johnson if they're sitting at that spot, which Bears fans, yeah, I know you're going to hate to hear that, but you can find more value in this draft by getting out of the top part of the first round. Even if you were to get to, we've seen trades. We've seen the Saints trade 2 late first round picks to the Green Bay Packers to move up to the top part of the draft. You know what I mean? Like, we've seen trades like that happen. If you can get really good value for that number 9 pick and a guy like Jalen Carter, who you think, regardless of what you think he did at his pro day, regardless of who you think he is as a person, is probably the top 2, top 3 most talented player in this draft. If that's not there, there's just not another guy that kind of sticks it to me that I would draft at number 9 in most other drafts. So, or at least at a position of need, or at a position that it would actually justify us drafting with that pick. So if Jalen Carter's not there at 9, I really think you have to strongly consider trading back. And I think Ryan Poles is the guy who's already shown that he can move back and get a lot of really good value.
Yeah, and you hit on a few things there.
Sorry if I went a little long. But.
No. That's because I honestly feel the exact same way about Anthony Richardson. I also am not a fan of Levis, like, at all. I know his bicep grade would be on point in the Perfetti like grading system, but realistically, I don't see it, and I really don't see it with Richardson at all. It's just like, yes, you hit the nail on the head. He is not a normal talent in terms of athleticism for his position. Like, he's a freak, and he does have a cannon. He could throw a nice deep ball. And that's something he showed at Florida, but like, there's a lot that is missing. And I feel like a lot of people are banking on the outlier. Hey, we have Brian Dabble and Ken Dorsey fucking training Josh Allen for 3 years and like making him perfect. And people are kind of really starting to forget how good of a prospect Josh Allen was. Like, he was raw for sure, but like, he had a different kind of arm. Like, I don't think Anthony Richardson can really, I don't know. I don't think he can touch it in terms of, I know there's probably numbers saying like, oh, he threw at this speed, and the people that really like Anthony Richardson will throw it in my face, but like, it is an outlier. And while I think every quarterback that gets drafted, 99.9% of quarterbacks that get drafted, depend very heavily on their situation, especially early years, for how they develop and what kind of quarterback they become. I think it's extra important for Anthony Richardson, just because like, there's a lot to work on, mechanics wise, decision making, like just a lot of things, right? Like, so that's my only concern. And I listen, if I'm Detroit or Seattle, I'm hoping to God that he falls to my second pick and I have a stable quarterback situation right now. And then you can really put in the work and try to develop him. And because he can become an elite talent for sure. But there's a lot of guys that have come around that can become an elite talent that don't fulfill that potential. And like, in a top 10 situation, I don't know if I'm willing to do that if I'm the Raiders, right? Like, I don't know if I'm willing. I'm definitely not doing that if I'm the Lions or the Seahawks with my first couple picks. So, do the Colts really want to do that? Maybe Ballard's desperate with Irsay, but I'm not 100% sure, right? Like, I just think it's a lot of people are predicting these quarterbacks to go in the top 5, all 4 of them, or top 7. Like, I don't know if they all go in the top 10, as I was saying. I don't think it does it for me. I think the class that came out with Burrow, Tua, and Herbert, like, their top 3 was way, way stronger. And they didn't all go top 5, right? Like there were some better position players and mixed in with that as well. But same thing with the Josh Allen draft. Like Lamar didn't go till 32 that year. So, Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis were supposed to be top 10 picks last year, and Malik Willis went in the 3rd round, and Kenny Pickett didn't go till 20. So I just feel like quarterbacks get this unwarranted amount of hype. Sorry, my dog's gonna freak out. So if at some point if you see me just run away, take over for a hot second. But yeah, I just feel like there's a lot of hype now when it comes to the prospects and that 9 position, as you were alluding to. I just don't feel super comfortable with the value you would get at 9. Like I feel like, especially if Paris Johnson and Skoronski are the 2 tackles getting the most love and attention, I think Darnell Wright's the best tackle in the draft, right? And that's someone that's, you want to hear about the discrepancy of draft grades. Let me pull up Darnell Wright really quick. I have a little.
I do just want to pop in on the audio version to say that I just could not agree more with that that idea that he is the best tackle in the draft. But please continue.
Yeah, but look at like someone like Darnell Wright. Like this is 4 different. So you got to think there's 32 different teams. So those values are all over the place. But I took just 4 of the top sites and what they ranked Darnell Wright at: 69, 71, 117, and 30. So there's that much of a discrepancy, right? And that comes out to an average of like the 70th pick. There's 0 fucking shot I think he even makes it out of the 1st round, right? So like those mock drafts and those simulators are only so good. There's trends in them. You figure out the algorithm when you press the button enough times. You can start realizing like, oh, Darnell Wright's not going till pick 55 on PFF mock draft simulator, so I'm going to make sure to get him at 35, right? Like shit like that, right? So unfortunately, you're not going to get 12 starters in the draft, but the Bears do have, 10 picks going into it? Or 8 picks? 10 picks? I think they got the 4th from Philly. They got their 7th. They got 2 a comp pick. I think they have 10, bro. They got 2.
Yeah, the Chicago Bears have 10 picks in the NFL draft.
They have like 9, 54. That's another thing, dude. That Claypool shit just keeps popping up. I don't want to talk about it, but 32 would be such a huge pick in this draft because I think that's where you're going to get extreme value is in those early 30s. And that's why you would have liked to get Carolina's number 39. But, kind of conflicting what I was saying earlier, I liked how Poles kind of was sticking and picking with his top draft picks and then moving back with his later ones. I kind of would like just one trade at that 9 pick. I don't know how much value you're going to get though, right? Like the way a lot of people are looking at it, you're lucky if Jalen Carter falls. I don't think he does because he's got too much talent in a very depleted top 10. So I feel like he's like a Seattle type of guy. I feel like Pete Carroll's going to love him. Right. I don't know. So then you're looking at Witherspoon, maybe Gonzalez, right? And that's if all the quarterbacks go in the top 4, right? Because the big 3 are Tyree Wilson, Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, and then you have the 4 quarterbacks. So that's 7 picks right there. Then like people are starting to sell themselves on JSN, or I don't know. I haven't heard much about Quentin Johnson, and I don't like him, especially not in the top 10, but like wide receivers do go higher than they should because they get paid a lot of fucking money and it's hard to keep them in-house. So I don't know. Like, do you want to entertain a guy like Quentin Johnson with the 1st pick? I'm not sure.
See, what makes that hard, if you ask me pre-Carolina trade, yeah, I'm all over that because I really do like Quentin Johnson. And honestly, you could probably could have even made an argument, and I've been notorious in my opinion of Jackson Smith and Jigba. Mostly because I'm a Wisconsin Badgers fan. I can go ahead and admit that. I know Dylan's not in the chat anymore, so it don't matter. But I really think with the DJ Moore trade, when you have Chase Claypool, you have a Darnell Mooney potential extension coming up. Like, I think wide receiver, this is a draft where you're going to go take a chance on somebody maybe a little bit later, a guy who falls, But I don't think we're going to. I don't see that as being a smart pick for us. If you would ask me that pre-Carolina trade, I'm really on board with that. Unfreaking believable. Dylan's still in the chat. This is probably the longest he's been in here. But I really do think if like a guy like Jalen Carter doesn't fall, and I know this is going to be a turnoff to a lot of Bears fans because I can see the hype for Skorinski. I can see the hype for freaking Paris Johnson. Like I see it. Even Broderick Jones, I feel like it's a guy that's been starting to get brought up a little bit more, which is a guy I really wouldn't dislike, but I could see him falling quite a bit, if I'm being honest. That would be somebody that you could trade back and get if that's somebody you wanted to go get. But I just don't see the value at 9. I'm with you, Lucas. I just do not see the value at 9. I think if Jalen Carter's there, Charlie Campbell over on Twitter has already reported the Bears have been digging heavy into Jalen Carter at the potential he does fall into 9. So I could see it as if he's there, absolutely the Bears are going to stick and pick. If he's drafted, say 7 or 8, or even earlier, and that all depends on where Will Anderson fits in all this too, and a guy like Tyree Wilson who's kind of moved up the boards as of late as well, from Texas Tech. But I really don't see us sticking and picking unless a guy like Jalen Carter is right there. Tyree Wilson is potential. If that's the other guy that kind of falls into the fray, that's somebody else I could see us sticking and picking, because we really do need that interior defensive line help. And if we're not going to pick it early, then we're going to probably take a couple shots at guys mid-round in the draft, kind of like a Keanu Benton's of the world, that are going to fall in more of that like second, third round type area. But I think if you can find a team, if one of these quarterbacks, if like a Will Levis or an Anthony Richardson start falling out of the top 10, and you can find a team that's kind of like wanting to really move up and go grab that guy, whether that's even like a team like the Commanders, who, while they have kind of said that Sam Howell will be their starting quarterback, maybe a guy like Anthony Richardson or Will Levis falling could potentially change that idea a little bit, especially if they can trade up to get that pick. But I really think it's a weird spot, and this is a weird draft to have that pick in, because really the heavy hitters in the top part of this draft are guys that we really don't need to be focusing too heavy on. It's kind of quarterback heavy for quarterbacks that I'm not too thrilled on. There's some good wide receivers, but we already addressed the wide receiver situation. And I'll be straight, man. Paris Johnson and Peter Skorinski, and I'm sure I've said his last name about 7 different times at this point. They just don't move the needle for me like I feel like they should.
Well, and a lot of people are predicting Skoronski or whatever is going to kick into guard because his arms are, I think they're below 33 inches, like 32 and an eighth inch, which, I mean, that's like, as much as I hate analytics and metrics, that is kind of one of those metrics that is very damning for offensive tackles, especially. So
his arms are 32 and a quarter.
32 and a quarter, right? So I was pretty close. That's how much of a pervert I am. But I'm not even as concerned. Like, so if he kicks into guard and you take him at the 9th pick and he turns into an all-pro, which people are saying they think he will be an all-pro guard, it wouldn't be the worst thing at 9, but he's a Packers fan, dude. Grew up a Packers fan. His grandpa was on the Packers. No desire for him. Paris Johnson, I see it because he's raw, but like, I mean, he's athletic and he's the prototype at the position. And I think he's someone that you could feel comfortable. Like, he's not going to come in and say, I'm a left tackle, right? Or you have to put him at left tackle. You can put him at the right and keep Braxton at left, which a lot of fans seem to be wanting to experiment with. So I don't know. But either way, both of those guys I'm not very high on. And usually when there is a top 10 tier tackle, they go in the top 5. Like it's kind of hard for big time tackles to slip. I get it. Like, you're going to name tackles that were drafted at 16 or whatever, but Laramie Tunsil went at 11, and that's because the gas mask picture came out like right before the draft. Otherwise, there's no way he's slipping to that. So I feel like at 9 for the first tackle to be going, especially with most mocks, like that's pretty telling, because usually you're going to see a couple tackles go in the top 10. They are one of those premium positions when they're worthy, right? So it just, I don't know. I'm not super high on them. If I had to pick a guy, like, I really liked Evan Witherspoon at 9. If you were forced to sit and pick, because like I said, there might be pretty unanimous decision. Hey, we don't really love any of these prospects here. There's always that team that thinks they're one cornerback away and could love a guy, or thinks, hey, Quentin Johnson is that dude and he's sitting there, or JSN, so let's go get him if the Bears don't want him. There could be a team that falls in love with one of those guys, but I don't think you're going to get the kind of premium capital that you would want for trading down 5 spots or 7 spots in the first round. And then it kind of puts you in another no man's land. So it's it's a weird spot to be in. I hope he navigates his way through it well. But my biggest thing is if you were to trade down, then you can justify reaching for a consensus second round prospect in Darnell Wright, right? Because you have that other pick to rebound and then go ahead and either double up at that position or go after another position that you really like, a value pick, right? So it's just it's tough to reach for a guy like Darnell Wright when not a lot of people are mocking him, right? Like you look at I'm trying to think of the dude from, where was he from? Wyoming or North Dakota State or some shit like that. The Patriots picked in the first round, and he was supposed to be like a third round pick, right? Like it's going to be tough to really justify it. Not that the Twitter world really matters, because if that top 10 pick becomes what he's supposed to be, it no one gives a fuck about what they were mocked at or anything like that, right? But it just gives you a lot more justification. And hey, I traded back 5 picks. Maybe this guy was a number 30 overall prospect, but we got more capital and we went with the guy that we liked, right? I just feel like that's the way to go. And I think that's going to be the most ideal position. Hopefully they do trade back again, but maybe they do have Devin Witherspoon rated really high, right? To me, a pick like Devin Witherspoon, or maybe it's Christian Gonzalez, right? One of these corners, Joey Porter, maybe it is a tackle, but I feel like if at pick 9 or like pick 56, pick 61, one of those first picks that we have, if we were to take a player like a linebacker or a running back or like someone in a full room, then I feel like I would start to understand Poles' plan more. I feel like it's uncovering itself, and maybe he is just going after cornerstone pieces, and it is an extra long rebuild. Maybe they gave Poles that time. Maybe Bill Polian, said, fuck it, dude. You guys got 7 years before your stadium's going to be built. Give him a 7-year contract, because those numbers were never revealed, how long Eberflus and Poles' contracts are. But at least I feel like it would start to justify some of what's going on with Ryan Poles, right? If he was really just trying to be like, hey, we need 9, 10, 12 blue chip players to go win a Super Bowl. So we're going to acquire them as quickly as possible and not really take too much risk in free agency, or in terms of how we're paying people, until we have everything fucking nailed down. If he takes a tackle, it could be that he thinks the tackle is the best player on his board, or he could be trying to fill a position of need, or like a defensive tackle, right? Like Kalijah Clancy is one of those guys that you see that's a 3 technique, and he's getting some Aaron Donald comps, similar, coming out of Pittsburgh, and not having the ideal frame for the position. But that's like a tough pick at number 9, right? I feel like if you take one of those guys, or that next dip into that next tier of edge rushers, if one of the really good ones don't fall to you, then I'm starting to get some concern, because it's like, okay, your plan was to pay these guys in free agency and then try to fill holes by overdrafting people. So, this draft's going to just give us that next set of data that we need to truly analyze how Poles is doing. Because, we've been giving mulligans in terms of, we'll complain about certain moves, but you can't evaluate it until you get an idea of what the vision is, right? And I feel like it's been hard, and people are trying to say like scheme fit and all these bullshit terminology, but like you can't truly identify his vision right now. And I'm pretty good at connecting the dots.
Well, yeah, no, and I've always considered myself pretty strong at something like that too. I've done a pretty good job kind of maneuvering my way through most of the front offices I've had to deal with, being a Bears fan, and kind of getting an idea of how they want to build and how quickly they want to go about it. See, the thing that throws me off with Poles, and like I'm not trying to like beat a dead horse or anything like that, but coming into this draft without a right tackle really kind of like complicates like the strategy you kind of want to go with. Because I think I speak for quite a bit of Bears fans when I thought that offensive tackle position was going to be addressed in free agency. And I thought that was going to be something we weren't going to have to worry about in the draft, because we really like Braxton Jones on top of whoever we just signed. So that would have opened us up a little bit more to be able to take a shot on a guy like, say, Witherspoon, or like even like, this is where the love for Jalen Carter would even ramp up a little bit more. Or you do look at a guy like, Cansey, where it's like, that's a guy who looked really freaking good at Pitt, I do think Aaron Donald comparison, I swear, like every gap shooting defensive tackle under 300 pounds that's like hovering around 6 foot, they always get that Aaron Donald fucking comp, and it's only worse because Cansey went to Pittsburgh, which just adds to it that much more. But I've been hearing the same things, and I really do like him. You know, he's ACC Defensive Player of the Year for a reason. You know, he's a guy who can definitely go out there and ball. I just I'm with you though, Lucas. It's hard to know what Poles has going on in his head right now. Not that I can really doubt what he's doing because I don't totally know what he's doing yet. I can't say for sure it's like a good thing or a bad thing. Obviously, he didn't find a guy at offensive tackle in free agency that he could sink his teeth into. Or maybe there's a guy that he's still trying to fucking work with to get their price down that he's kind of keeping an eye on. You know what I mean? I don't quite know. But we do need to have a little bit more of an answer either before the draft or on draft day, either day 1 or day 2, about who's going to be our starting offensive tackle, whether it's on the left or right side, you know. But I do think if you do trade down, that opens you up, you know, like you said, and I think this is a really good point that you made, is being able to kind of take a little bit more of a shot at guys, because then it's like, okay, we're not in the top 10. This isn't a guy that if we draft and he kind of fizzles out, we're going to remember for the rest of our lives. It's going to be like if we draft him, you know, mid late first round, and he kind of fizzles out as a decent player, but nothing that kind of sets the world on fire. It's not going to be like an astronomical Kevin White type issue. You know what I mean? This is where you take the chance on a guy like Darnell Wright if he falls. You know, even though I'm with you, Lucas, and that's why I really had to clear that up, because I do believe Darnell Wright is the best offensive lineman in the draft, or offensive tackle in the offensive lineman in the draft. Actually, I think I'll actually safely say that because I watched him set the edge in the SEC for a really good fucking Tennessee offense, and he was part of what helped them tick. And this is me as a big offensive line guy. This is where you take a chance at a guy like Anton Harrison from Oklahoma, a guy who, you know, is used to pass blocking with how much they kind of really open it up down there. And, you know, I even think like a guy like Ryan Hayes, that's probably somebody more the second, maybe late second, third round. But that's even a guy who's 6'6", 298, has a little bit shorter arms, but somebody who is athletic enough to get to middle linebackers and can put on a little bit of weight and really be a heavy hitter. That's the benefit of trading down. If you stick at 9 and you pick, that's a pick that even if it is a Jalen Carter that falls that we're both really high on, we need Jalen Carter to pan out in that situation. You know what I mean? Because we stuck and picked at that. Is there a situation where we genuinely don't get value for number 9 and we have to stick and pick because like it wouldn't be worth it to trade back? You know, maybe, but I feel like on draft day, if you have guys because every team, as you said earlier in the pod, Lucas, has different valuations on different guys. If you find a team that really falls in love with one of those guys that starts falling out of the top 10 and you're sitting at 9 and you're kind of like waving your hand like, hey, I'm here to trade back, baby. You know, maybe
Quentin Johnson or Darnell or JSN. Like
that's what I mean. You know, a team could move up to go get that guy. You know, it's very, very possible. And like I said, I brought up the Commanders earlier, not because I'm not a Sam Howell guy, because I actually am. I think Sam Howell is a guy that if they stick with, they could probably get something out of. But if they've been doing their due diligence on quarterbacks throughout this process and they see a guy that they really like falling around like 9, I could see them being a team to really fucking try to gas it up and trade for that pick.
Well, maybe that's the optimist in me, but that's part of the reason. Like, I think that's why a trade down is going to be actually necessary, because I don't think I think Atlanta's the only one that might take a quarterback, but I think.
They just drafted freaking Malik Willis last year.
No, that was Tennessee.
Desmond Ridder. My bad.
Oh, they do have Desmond put it in your shit or Ridder. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I think they could for sure, but I don't know if they do. I think there's like no chance that Vegas, Detroit, Seattle take a quarterback. Maybe Indy does, right? Like, but I think that number 9 pick, it might be Will Levis or Anthony Richardson there. And who knows, maybe the Jets and the Packers deal falls through and the Jets need to move up to go get Will Levis. Right? Like there's anything that could happen. But I do think that helps, right? Like if one of those quarterbacks were to fall, then you're looking at a team like Washington. Maybe the Patriots don't love Mac Jones. I see that being less of a possibility, but you know, the Jets and Washington early in the draft scouting process, the LP, bicep process. That's one thing I noticed. Is like if one of those guys falls and the Jets or the Commanders want to be a little bit more desperate, like and move up, that's who I think you can go after. But yeah, no, that's why, dude. That's why I say like I would feel a little bit better about Poles if he took a position at a place of strength, right? Like I don't think he's going to take Bijan Robinson at 9, or I don't think he's going to take someone like I don't even know if there's a quarterback or linebacker really rated that high, but say he was going to take a linebacker at number 9. Like that would give me a lot more faith in him in a weird way, because I would be like, okay, he just paid these guys and he thought this was the best player on the draft by a wide margin. So he's someone that he's building around in the future. They can cut TJ Edwards next year. He might surpass him, whatever. You needed to get to the cap floor anyways, right? Or same thing with Bijan Robinson. Like, yeah, we can fucking cut Travis Homer. No problem. We don't care that we paid him. Like, we were just trying to fill spots and then take the best available player.
We're just trying to find every scenario to get Travis Homer off the roster.
I'm just saying that would give me like a weird sense of like, okay, he is disciplined enough to not be a fucking idiot, right? But like on the opposite hand, Pace was way too aggressive and it got him into a lot of trouble. But you can be not aggressive enough. You can be Chris Ballard. Like you can keep going conservative and taking guards and tackles and not really moving the needle with what you're doing. At some point you have to grab onto your balls and go move up, right? Like I don't know. And it's funny you say that, because what was Leonard Floyd was a number 9 pick. I know Pace traded up for him and gave up a little bit of capital to go get Leonard Floyd, but like Leonard Floyd was not a bad player, but he got still to this day gets a lot of grief. And if things go south for Poles and he gets a Clancy, and Clancy just turns out to be an okay player that leaves after his 5th-year option or doesn't even get it, like goes to another team and gets a $10 million deal, it's going to be seen as a fucking failure, because that's what the top 10 is. So I just don't like the top 10 enough to the point where I just think you trade back and get Darnell Wright. That would be my solution. I would try to trade back as far as possible, and then get Darnell Wright or one of the tackles that we talked about, right? Like they're not all getting picked before pick like 16, something like that. So then you just get one of those guys.
If you can trade out of that 9 pick and still pick up obviously a later first rounder and another top 100 pick, like that's a win. That's a pretty nice little fucking grab. Because I think with where we're at right now and just kind of looking at the draft picks that we do have, we currently have 4 picks technically in the top 100 and we have 103. So like we are prioritizing those picks in the top 100 to be able to kind of maneuver to the guys that we want throughout that top 100 of the big board that we really like. I do want to touch on 2 points here really quick though, because I thought you brought up a couple good ones. People need to remember that Vic Fangio, that guy that everyone loves, every Bears fan I know loves Vic Fangio, he wanted Leonard Floyd. So like anyone who wants to go ahead and shit on Leonard Floyd, just remember your boy Vic, our boy Vic, because I love Vic Fangio. I was so freaking happy when we hired him in the first place, just because of what he did in San Francisco. He wanted Leonard Floyd because he reminded him of Aldon Smith. So just clear that up. Also, with your point about the Raiders not drafting a quarterback, my only thought to that, and Lucas, I know you just popped out because your dog's probably going nuts, but my only thought to that is Josh McDaniels is their head coach. There is no other way to beat around the bush there. Josh McDaniels traded Jay Cutler for Kyle Orton in one of the craziest trades. Even Bronco fans still look at that trade and they're like, what the fuck were we doing? Not because they love Jay Cutler, but the fact that they traded him as hastily as he did. And he still went and drafted Tim Tebow in the first round. So like a guy like Anthony Richardson, an athletic Florida quarterback, I'm just saying, dude, that's tinging all of freaking Josh McDaniels particles right now. I'm trying to stay appropriate, but like, dude, that's definitely like tickling every freaking hair at the bottom of his sack. It's like, oh, I just got my veteran quarterback like I did with Kyle Orton back in Denver. Oh, there's an athletic Florida quarterback I could draft in the first round. Woo-hoo, I just got rid of a quarterback that we had here for a while that people liked. I'm just saying, dude, the Josh McDaniels situation is such a wild card. The Raiders are always a wild card in the first place, but like I will stand firmly under the belief that time is a flat circle and that Josh McDaniel's an idiot. So I think it's very possible that they end up sticking and picking and drafting a quarterback right there, which would only help the Jalen Carter idea that he could fall. I do not trust the Raiders to do anything smart. As far as the Falcons, I think they're going to go safe. And Detroit, I don't think they draft a quarterback. They're just, I think they waited out a year to see if Goff can really lead them to do something, because I think they're trying to load up a little bit and they see Green Bay. You know what I mean? Aaron Rodgers is probably going to be a fucking Jet this year, and Jordan Love it's going to be the Jordan Love era, you know? So Minnesota's kind of falling apart as well, just because Minnesota won almost all of their games last year in one-score games. They lost their playoff game in a one-score game, so I don't think a lot of teams are really taking them too seriously as well. It's like Detroit's in a situation where they're sitting at a top 10 pick and a team that they really kind of believe in, so I don't think they draft a quarterback either. But yeah, I don't know. I'm with you. I think if Carter's not there at 9, you trade back, you get another offensive tackle that maybe has a little bit lower of a floor in some people's opinion, but has a lot more freaking upside. And if anyone's going to draft that guy, it's going to be Ryan Poles. I have a lot of belief in that because I really like what we got out of Braxton Jones. And sure, someone could beat me over the head for bringing up Braxton Jones and Poles drafting him, you know, because everyone kind of sees that as an unpopular opinion that we should trust him on that. But like, if he can get that in the 5th round, I'm willing to give him a shot on a guy in the 1st round. That's why I don't think we even need that like safe bet in Paris Johnson or Peter Skoronski at that pick. So I think there's a lot of different ways you can maneuver with that. And, you know, even if we don't draft defense, we talked a lot about defensive tackles. We talked a lot about offensive tackles. You know, I don't think we draft a guard or center at this point. Plus, there's no center. I mean, unless you want to move Skoronski at center, which people have talked about, but you don't do that. And there's no center within the 1st round that you really want to mess around with. And I think a guy like Tittman's a guy, you know, maybe that's the Badger fan in me talking, but that's a guy that I feel like you could kind of have fall to you later, you know, just kind of fall in your lap. Especially when you have a guy like freaking Steve Avila, who's just kind of running away as the top center in the draft right now. And I think that's a guy who will get overdrafted. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways the Bears can maneuver it. I think they trade back. I know we've kind of beaten this point for about 45 minutes now, but
I feel like we're coming at it from different angles, though. I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm just looking at it right now and looking at the needs, right? And everyone's seeing the Texans need as a quarterback. Like, how much would that just fucking flip everything upside down if they're like, no, yeah, we're taking Will Anderson. We don't like these quarterbacks that much.
Dude, they drafted fucking Mario Williams and nobody thought they should.
Dude, that's what I'm saying. Like, what, like anything can happen, and you know, we could be looking at a completely different pick at 9 than we're thinking. Like, it might be a Lucas Van Ness for all we know. But you know, for one of these, really any of Carter, Anderson, or Tyree Wilson to fall, you're really needing the Panthers to go, obviously, quarterback. That one seems like the only given, and it's looking like Stroud over Young.
It'll be Stroud. It's kind of playing pretty much into that at this point, unless they're really trying to leverage that pick, but I don't think they are. I think they're going to draft Stroud.
Should we put our takes out there now? I'm a Stroud guy. Duke's a young guy. I think Stroud's going to be the best quarterback in this draft. I don't know if anyone's going to actually turn into a superstar. But I think Stroud will be the best one. And I know you're like,
I think we've talked about it a little bit, but I mean, you know, and I don't necessarily dislike CJ Stroud. I just, when I see what Justin Fields did at Ohio State, and then I see what CJ Stroud did at Ohio State, CJ Stroud is like the Mac Jones of this situation. I think he's like that kind of like the safer one with the lower ceiling, you know, and I wouldn't even say necessarily a higher floor. He's just kind of CJ Stroud will start in the NFL for a while. I don't doubt that one bit. But do I think he's going to be number 1 pick overall worthy? I don't know, you know, because I think as much as I'm someone who shits on Ryan Day, and a lot of it has to do with me being a Badgers fan, I can admit that. Dylan can't admit that, but I can admit that. Ryan Day can really get a lot out of the quarterbacks that he's given. I haven't seen an Ohio State quarterback in a long time that hasn't been able to drive that fucking offense. The only one that's kind of just really set me off was Justin Fields, and I told you that from the start. Even when I would shit on Fields when he was playing Wisconsin or something like that, or like I would want Ohio State to lose, like it was impossible to deny like his deep throw accuracy, like things that he could have done really on any team in the nation. And Stroud, I have my doubts in that sense. I don't think his deep ball is all that great. I think he has benefited a little bit more of playing with guys like JSN and Marv Harrison Jr., who could potentially be a number 1 overall pick, if we're being honest, and we haven't seen that from wide receiver in a minute. But if anyone's going to do it with the way the hype's going right now and what we've seen from him on the football field, he's a guy that could do it. And I mean, he's got the right freaking name for it.
Not in next year's draft, but I do think if he was in this year's draft or the year before's draft, it's a potential number 1 overall pick. Unless
I think even if he does what he's done with a new quarterback taking over at Ohio State, there are going to be teams that are going to be really hard pressed not to pick him number 1. Really hard pressed. Because, like, dude, you look at what his dad did, and
I understand that, but you're talking about Caleb Williams coming out, and he's getting obscene amount of hype already. And I would assume someone is tanking for him.
Yeah,
maybe to start the season, but I think next year's quarterback class, if we would have had pick number 1 in next year's draft, like that's worth its weight in fucking gold. So that's all I'm getting at. Like, while I think Marv Harrison is going to be a top 5 player in his draft, I don't know if I could give him the number 1. I do think in the last 2 years, though, like I think you could justifiably take Marv Harris over any of the players in this draft, quarterbacks included, and then last year as well. I think that's a reasonable statement, but there hasn't been a ton of wide receivers at number 1. There was a stretch there, and like not many of them were great. So who knows? Anything could happen. If it's the Bears and they love Justin Fields, but they have Carolina's first pick, and I still see like a team like the Bears with the quarterback situation ironed out. They'd be like, okay, who's number 2? Do you want Caleb Williams? We'll trade back 1 spot with you, like, and ensure they get him. But just think it's going to be kind of hard for him to go number 1 overall. In my opinion, he's the best college wide receiver I've seen, like as a sophomore. I don't think I've ever seen anyone in their true sophomore year play the way he has.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty hard pressed to think anyone off the top of my head. And his route running is absurd. And like you take away all his physical attributes, you take away his great hands, you take away his speed, like his route running. That's when I see his dad. It's absurd, because that's what made Marvin Harrison one of the best receivers in football, quietly one of the best receivers in football, because he happened to have Peyton Manning throwing him the football. But like, he helped Donovan McNabb become a first-round pick. And I know there's a lot of Donovan McNabb guys here in Chicago, but like him at Syracuse, those two together were fucking dynamite. And it's because Marvin Harrison was just absolutely stunting on fools and breaking ankles. And I see so much of that in his son. It's absurd. And I try not to fall in those traps of like say like a Joey Porter Jr. coming out of this draft right now. Like, good player. Don't know if I draft him in the first round. I think he's more of a second, third round pick. But he will get drafted in the first round. He'll probably get drafted by the fucking Pittsburgh Steelers, because that's just life. But I don't like falling into that trap too much. But like, you look at what Marv Harrison does, and even like a guy like Patrick Surtain Jr., like what he did, and even what he's doing in the NFL right now, like those are guys that just immediately stick out in my head, where it's like you see so much of their dad in them outside of their physical attributes, where it's like, okay, so not only is this guy an insane talent, an insane athlete, he's fucking polished. And getting polish out of the NFL draft is it's not as normal as people think. Even looking at the top 10 of this draft, there's not a lot of polish there. CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, both guys that'll probably win you a lot of football games. But is there like that perfect sense of polish? No. Will Levis, huge arm, not a polished fucking arm, because he can't throw a tight spiral. Will Anderson, he has his issues. Anthony Richardson, obviously not polished. He's the complete opposite of polished, but his physical presence is just so much the high upside. Even a guy like Jalen Carter, insane athlete, and like the polish is really close to totally being there, but definitely not like a fucking absolute proven guy. I love Jalen Carter. When you're able to find that, it's very rare, and that's my only reason why I would think a guy like Marv Harrison potentially could. But to your point with Caleb Williams, I think it's fucking impossible for him not to be the first overall pick.
Yeah,
unless the team that gets the first is set at quarterback and they're insistent sticking at that pick, which I wouldn't totally understand, but we've seen weirder things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just to kind of encapsulate everything you said, it looks like Marv Harrison Jr. was being taught by a Hall of Famer how to run routes since he was just old enough to walk. Like, it looks like it's a part of his being, if that makes sense. It looks like it's just so natural, right? So my guess is his pops did have him running routes at a very young age. Probably was in every incredible football camp. Marv Harrison was the man too. Like, he was really just a fucking Hall of Fame human being as well, right? So you'd assume, he has a great son as well. Good kid too. That's another thing. You're probably not gonna have to worry about any off the field stuff or anything like that. So
man, Marvin, just jump in. I'll let you finish. Marvin Harrison running a fucking post corner route was just always one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen.
He was just always,
it was impossible to cover.
And then the speed too, right? And like, his son's got it. I don't think he's going to be as fast as his dad, but the speed was there as well. So size, speed, intangibles. I mean, everything you want. He's kind of the perfect prospect. And I almost would, like, if the Bears were sitting at 1 this year, I would have thought it was totally justifiable to stick and pick Marv Harrison Jr. So I really think he moves the needle that much, to be honest. Like, you get a top 3 wide receiver and he enters the league like that, like a Justin Jefferson. Like, the Vikings should have crapped out way before. They've been kind of mortgaging and playing the Kirk Cousins route for a while. They've been losing that defense very quietly. Offensive line still not great. Dalvin Cook's gotten older. Like, Justin Jefferson is the only reason why that team is still like has life in it. And you could still see them being like a wild card for the division. Same thing with a guy like Jamar Chase coming in and just being like that unstoppable. It just changes everything for your young quarterback, for your vet quarterback, whoever it is. So back to the 2023 draft, not the 2024 draft. I think I said 2025 at some point, which I'm losing track of fucking years. Let's be real here, dude. Like, the Jetsons was taking place right now. So that's how fucking old. But for this really to happen, you need, so for one of the big 3 edge rushers to get to you, you need realistically the Lions or the Seahawks, which I don't think it'll be the Seahawks. You need the Lions to fall in love with a cornerback and take a cornerback or a wide receiver. That's possible as well, but they need a defensive lineman. I think Carter gets taken by them. That's my unfortunate. I think that's the unfortunate reality. Then you look at someone like Seattle. D-line is really their biggest need. They're not going to really need a wide receiver, so I think one goes there. And then you kind of can hope that Arizona trades down enough and maybe they miss out on Will Anderson. And they're like, you know what, fuck it. We like a corner more, right? Like, or maybe we need to replace DeAndre Hopkins, so we'll take a wide receiver. Something like that. But you just need a wide receiver and a tackle, a combination of something like that to go before, right? Maybe the Raiders take Paris Johnson Jr. Like, that would be huge. If the Raiders took Paris Johnson Jr. and the Falcons took Quentin Johnson, then you would be sitting there with one of those 3 edge rushers. So you need just those 4 quarterbacks and 2 position players other than D linemen to go for one of the big 3 to fall. And then I think it's completely justifiable to stick and pick at 9 with either Tyree Wilson, which I don't think he's the best scheme fit. Will Anderson's a lot more, and same with Jalen Carter. And it just feels like Jalen Carter because of, the arrest and then bad pro day and things like that. He seems to be the one that's going to slip. But I truly think if you were to look at all 3 of them in a vacuum and just analyze tape, no stats involved, nothing, just like, how does he affect the game? I think it's so far and away Jalen Carter. I don't even think it comes close. That's why I feel like it's a pipe dream to wish for him to fall to 9, but who knows, man? Maybe
it's kind of working out to be the perfect storm right now. It really is. And I mean, I don't know if I brought it up on last week's show or the one before, but like, I mean, I could see this as really being a situation where the Bears have really kind of kept digging at Jalen Carter, even after the bad pro day, everything like that. Like, there's still reports coming out. The Bears are still kind of like looking at what's going on with him, you know, keeping an eye on him. That could be a situation where they really think they have a strong enough base and character and a strong enough leadership structure at House Hall right now that they could bring in a guy like this, bring him around the current team and be like, hey, we can get you to, if we can get you to buy in, you're going to be one of the best fucking defensive linemen in all of football. Like, it's as simple as that. And if you ever wanted a defensive head coach to bring in for a guy like that, Matt Eberflus seems like a pretty fucking no-nonsense guy to be able to bring in with a Jalen Carter to kind of put that out of him, you know? Like I said before, and I know I'm recycling a point a little bit here, but like, I just think of, you know, everyone talking about Jalen Johnson and Eddie Jackson potentially not fitting into the whole, you know, hits dynamic, the hit scheme, and both those guys kind of being just like charter members of it by the end of the season where they're bought in, you know? So maybe there's something, maybe they really do believe Matt Eberflus, you know, and even Alan Williams can be those guys to be able to do that with a prospect like Jalen Carter, who is kind of hitting that troubled label right now. You know what I mean? So if it's the perfect storm, I'm willing to take a chance on that type of talent. If Jalen Carter is a guy who doesn't work out because of his own demons off the field, or he makes mistakes and stuff like that, I can live with that rather than a guy just being flat out terrible at that pick, which I don't think Jalen Carter can really be outside of him being his own worst enemy. And I do believe in the fact that Matt Eberflus could potentially be a guy that could help turn his career around.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think they are already sold on the player. And the reason why, because they are taking a bit more, like, they're not just looking into Carter, like, they're taking a much longer look at him. And that probably is because they believe there's a possibility he can fall to them. And they need to make sure that he is not, like, because they know talent wise, they don't think he's going to be a bust. But they need to make sure that anything that may be considered an off the field issue will not prevent him from being labeled a bust, right? Or someone that has to leave the league because, you know, I don't want to like say certain situations, but maybe flashing their guns at an Instagram live video and stuff like that, where now you have to cut this player, things like that. Right. And John Morant was lucky enough to be like a top 5 player in the entire fucking league, so they're not going to cut him. But someone like Damon Arnett, I believe that's his name, Damon Arnett, right? He played for the Raiders, and it was like right after Henry Ruggs, and then he had to get cut, right? First round pick. So you don't want someone to force themselves into the bust category because of shit that has nothing to do with football. So I'm assuming that's what they're investigating right now to see, like, hey, how much of a risk is this actually? And that, you know, as someone who thinks Jalen Carter is an incredible talent, and thinks he would be the best player there at 9, I'm glad they're doing their due diligence, right? And if right now they're taking a long and hard enough look at him, where if they decide, hey, it's just too much risk involved, like, I'll be okay with it. I would be okay with it. And then you'd probably end up getting a haul for someone like Pittsburgh trading up to go get a Jalen Carter, because he's just like someone that, you know, Mike Tomlin and the fucking that organization is going to take care of, right? And make sure that they're on the right path. So, and then you're going to end up getting a haul because someone's paying for a premium player at that point, similar to like a quarterback.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I'm of the same mindset. I really do like seeing us do our due diligence. You know, it's nice to just not get kind of lost in the idea that it's just like this insane talent and we need to get it regardless. I'm glad we're kind of taking our time with, you know, and like that's just what good organizations do, you know. And if Pittsburgh's a team that would want a guy like Jalen Carter, I guarantee like Tomlin's doing his due diligence on stuff like on everything like that, you know. Baltimore, if they want a guy like that, they're going and doing their due diligence, you know. The Patriots, if that's the guy they want, they're going and doing their due diligence on that, you know. So I really, really like the whole process about that. If you are a Bears fan who's listened this far and you're an anti-Jalen Carter guy and everything like that, you know, I understand the reasons why people would be, you know. I understand it's easy to look at the fit like plays he took off at Georgia, where because people do the low light reels on Twitter and think that that's just the entire description of a football player. All I'm saying is like maybe come around a little bit to the idea, because I think it is a genuine possibility, and I think teams are gonna, if any team was gonna fall into a spot at 9 where they're gonna take a chance on a guy like that, it would be us. I really believe it would be, because that is not only a position in need, but that's before all this happened. That's the best guy. That's the best player in the draft.
And not that it's an excuse, but people forget too. And we're talking strictly, like, I hate to have to give a prerequisite. We've already talked about everything that happened with Jalen Carter in terms of his arrest and stuff like that. And, talked about it in we're talking about the football side of it at this point, right? But he was banged up for a lot of last year. So if you really look at his tape from 2021, you're like, holy fuck. Like, it's a different, you could tell he was hurting last year. So I don't know, man. I think he'll be the best available. If he's not there, I'm okay with Witherspoon, I guess, in conclusion, right? And then otherwise, I want you to trade down and take Darnell Wright. That would be the most ideal situations for me. Honestly, though, you're a Texas guy. Like, would you be upset if they took Bijan at 9? Ooh, I just put a gun to your head, huh?
That's the reason why that's brutal, is because I love the player. Don't love us drafting a running back that high, though. Like, just especially with what we just did.
Are you an analytics guy now?
What?
Are you an analytics guy now? Dude, not a premium position, not worth
it. No. So listen, because I loved the Giants drafting Saquon Barkley at number 2, because I'm like, this is the fucking best player in the draft. Like, there's no denying it. And that's me being a Badgers fan watching him at fucking Penn State. It's a hard pill to swallow for me to say stuff like that. So no, I don't delegitimize running backs, especially ones that play for teams that I like. It's just, and again, I made the Adrian Peterson point at the top of the show, which is really what's kind of holding the gun to my head right now.
Jag off, because hold up, because before you make your point, I want to make sure like, all the guys we talked about, is there really anyone that you would say is a better prospect than Bijan Robinson? Not the big
Jalen Carter.
Not the big 3 rushers, right? But like anyone else we talked about, like that could possibly be there. Van Ness, Clancy, Parrish Johnson, one of the tackles. Like, I think it's fucking Payne and Garfield, dude. Like, at 9, if he's there, he will be the best player on the board, like by a pretty considerable margin.
I mean, if Carter's there, you can't pass on Carter.
No, I think Carter's a better prospect overall. But I'm just saying, outside of them, like if you're looking at Witherspoon or Gonzalez or these guys that are kind of getting mocked to number 9, like it's hard to say that Bijan's not a better prospect than all of them.
Yeah, no, it really is, and like I like our current running back room. I would have liked it a lot more had we kept a guy like David Montgomery. But honestly, if anything, if he were to fall to 9, that makes trading back more valuable to us, because a team could trade up to go get him, like, because he is that type of running back. Like, if you're going to hold him in that high regard, you have to think other teams are going to hold him in that high regard as well. Honestly, if we were in a different situation, we had other spots shored up in our roster, and we didn't have to maybe think about trying to trade back to get more top end players in this draft, I would say yes, you pull the trigger on that, absolutely. But with where we are as a roster, man, I really feel like the interior defensive line is big. Offensive tackle is just way too big, and like there's
reaching for positions.
Well, that's why I would say trade back.
That's what I'm saying, though. That's why it's a tricky fucking situation. And me personally, I want to make sure this is out on the airwaves. I'm not that high on Bijan. I think it's like I do think here, because I know I just said it's Bain and Garfield, but that's how much lower I am on these other guys that are getting mentioned at 9, that I think Bijan's a better prospect overall. But I like this running back draft a lot. I think there's going to be a lot of meat on the bone. Zach Charbonnet is my favorite running back in the entire draft. Right? But I am saying, like, in terms of, if you're crowdsourcing information and looking at this draft board that I came up with, compiled of like all the major websites, just trying to reflect, the variation and and differences. You know, I didn't get 32 of them, but I got 5 of the top fucking sites and all their draft boards. And it's like Bijan is rated 6 overall, right? So like if that's how the average of all the biggest teams see him, the Bears could have him ranked as number 3, and then he's by far the best player on the draft. Like for that would be there at 9, right? So it's kind of one of those. It's strange, and I'm surprised you weren't like a little bit more enticed by the idea, and you just shut it down right away.
Oh no,
you went.
I am, because I'm actually.
You're like, fuck running backs. Don't go till the 7th round. It's fucking bullshit. We can get Hall from fucking Northwestern. That's pretty much what you said. Yeah.
You're such a fucking bastard. No. Because you know damn well I love a good running back, and I love prioritizing the run game even in today's NFL. It's where I'm saying it's the perfect storm for a guy like Jalen Carter to fall. It's the perfect storm for us to fucking pass on a legitimate running back like that, because it just does not fit what we need right now. It really doesn't. And like you said, it is a deep running back draft. So if we're going to take a shot on a guy, it would be later. But even then, I really don't feel like, and I could be totally wrong because I am not Ryan Poles and I'm not in Ryan Poles' head. I just don't think we're prioritizing running backs in this draft. You know, we could have nothing but great running backs in this draft. And I still don't think, which I think we do have a lot of great running backs.
That's what pissed me off about his strategy. Why is the running back room full and you paid 3 guys, including your fullback? Why is your room fucking full when you have an extremely deep draft and your first pick of the 4th round could very well be like the best fucking running back, like a running back with a 3rd round grade, top of the 3rd round grade? Like then you kind of pigeonhole yourself. And sure, those are small potato type moves. But I don't know, man. It's just I listen, I agree. You can't take Bijan at 9. As much as I think he's pretty dynamic and things and shit like that. Like I don't see him in the light that everyone else sees him. I think people are kind of giving him similar to Saquon hype, which it's not. He's not getting that much, but there's draft boards out there that have him ranked as the number 1 or 2 overall prospect. Like he is a no doubter, which I think there's a very good chance he's going to be successful. But me personally, you trade down from 9, say you get down to like 16 with Washington, you should be able to pick up their fucking 2nd round pick. You might have to kick them back like one of your 5ths or something, but that's moving down far enough to warrant getting a 2nd round pick. If you were to take Darnell Wright and fucking Zach Charbonnet, or not even Zach Charbonnet, say you take Tajay Spears there, I would nut. Like I would nut. Because to me, that would just that would show like a hyper awareness. Or even if you were to trade down to 16 and pick up that 2nd rounder and then like use that 2nd rounder and a 3rd rounder to move up 10 spots and go get like an edge rusher, then I'm like, okay, he's showing that aggression that we need to see, right? But I want to see something like that. I want to see a little bit of I'm blanking on the actor's name, but I want to see a little bit of draft day. Kevin Costner. I want to see a little bit of Kevin Costner from him. Just some manipulation to be like, okay, this motherfucker is an assassin, right? Like that's what I want to see. Because you have the capital and the ability to manipulate like that.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can manipulate this draft. And I mean, it's definitely something we're going to talk about more moving forward, especially once we get I really want to talk about some of the ideas for the 2nd and 3rd round. I feel like we did dwell a lot on the 1st round because I think there are guys who are going to fall out.
It's the first time we've had a 1st round pick in like fucking 7 years. I think it deserved all that.
Yeah, no, it did. It 100% did. And I mean, even post number 1 overall pick and finally getting that trade, I think it almost makes the conversation a little bit more polarizing because I feel like a lot of us were living in fantasy land there for a little bit, which is fine. I'm cool with fantasy land every once in a while. It's pretty fun. You know, I weigh like 185 pounds with a fucking 6-pack ripped abs. But like, you know, every once in a while you got to hit back reality and be like, okay, so now we're at 9 and this is a fucking interesting spot to be in, especially with the way this whole draft cycle's gone so far. You know, it's been a little, I don't want to say unprecedented because I feel like it always happens. You know, even you brought up the Larry Tunsil with like, you know, the Jalen Carter situation, but like there's a lot of possibilities of what we can do at 9. And even as a team that's, you know, just played their way into the 1st overall pick, I still feel like we're not a team that needs to stick and pick at 9, which is also a little rare. You know what I mean? Because I feel like you kind of see teams that are that bad as we were last year, especially post Roquan trade. Had to get the Roquan mention at least somewhere in the podcast because everyone's convinced that's all we talk about. We usually you think like a bad team sticks and picks, but I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that. And I think the kind of the bottom heavy part of this draft kind of plays into that. I'm with you. We're not a quarterback needy team, and I think the top part of this draft is kind of weak. Besides Jalen Carter and even Will Anderson, and I think that sticking and picking there could be a mistake if we don't utilize it with the right guy. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you have anything else, but kind of rolling.
No, I'm more excited about the second round than the first round, to be honest, because I mean, you got the second day 2 is what day 1 is the first round, and then day 2 is second and third. So you got fucking 3 picks that are kind of bunched up there. I'm definitely intrigued to see what they're gonna do. I'm gonna assume they're gonna trade down with one, and then maybe trade up with another to kind of that's my guess.
You get a lot of value there too. That's my favorite part of like the second, third, and even hovering in the top part of the fourth round is like that's your fucking value picks right there. That's for a guy like me that likes to brag about any new thing that I buy being like, oh, I bought this at a cheaper price. You know what I mean? Like I got a hell of a fucking deal on this. Like I like telling people about how much I paid for my truck compared to how much they wanted to sell it to me for. I love the second and third round of the draft because that's the exact spot. That's where you have guys that fall out of the first that are going to come into camp with a chip on their shoulder because they think they should be that first round pick. They think they earned that. And maybe they fell out because, they felt like shit during the combine week. You know what I mean? Like they were taking Dayquil every single day because they were fucking feeling like garbage. And maybe they don't like traveling to Indianapolis at that point in the year. There's a lot of different variations of why somebody could play like shit on a certain day or look like shit at a pro day, and that's why that stuff is like always good to have, but it's not something that you need to like live your life by. So second and third round, I'm really excited about it. I think that's what we're going to go deep in on the next draft or the next episode, barring a free agent pickup, which we're starting to get a little later in the process right now. But
I think we're holding off here now until you get some. First of all, see what you're going to have to pay your draft class because I think there's going to be a lot of moves. And then second of all, I think you're just looking to get up to the floor. And I think we might actually even see a guy that's past 27 or 28 getting signed by the Bears, which they haven't done. But at that point, because let's be real here. Like when you look at the offense versus the defense right now, the offense is a piece or two away where you're like, holy fuck, right? Like, I think they're one offensive lineman, whether that's center or right tackle. And like if they were to take a top, like if they were to get Zay Flowers at the top of the second round or something because they traded up for him or they picked it up like trading down in the first round, I'd be like, fuck, dude, that's a really nice pick. Like I like Zay Flowers, right? I think he's a separator and something that's different than what we have right now. Or even like, I don't see Jordan Addison falling that far, but like something like that, right? I would be like, damn, this offense could be really fucking scary. Especially if Fields takes that next jump. The defense, though, like, let's be real here. That ship's kind of sailed. Like, maybe they're able to fill some holes. Maybe they get a guy like Jalen Carter to fall, and then they go and pay Yannick Ngakoue a contract he shouldn't get, but they need to get to the floor anyways, right? Like, something like that, you could feel like it's mended. But to be real here, that defensive line is probably not going to be very good this year, no matter what addition it is at this point. Who knows? Maybe they get fucking lucky and they hit like I could see very well Poles going top end of the draft offense. And then when he does those trade backs, kind of like how he did last year, and like, okay, I'm going to grab 3 offensive linemen with the extra picks I got. I could see him doing that with edge rushers and DTs. Like, hey, I'm getting fucking 4 of them. One of these guys has to be a starting caliber player, right? Just more shots at the board. So I don't know. I think I think the number one goal of this season, in my eyes, it was never going to be to win a Super Bowl, but I don't think you're going to have an inconclusive grade on Justin Fields after this year, right? Like even with let's just take a step back and really look at it. A healthy Darnell Mooney. Like we're not going to be seeing any legitimate target share to Equanimous St. Brown, let alone Amir Smith-Merced and Dante Pettis and like Like this room has gotten vastly better just by the DJ Moore addition. What's it called? Being healthy. Like as much as I don't like what we gave up for Claypool, you could have a lot worse wide receiver threes, right? And like Mooney's a damn good player. We've gotten to know him for a while. He can play ball. He can get open. He can make catches. And then DJ Moore kind of is going to attract that focus. And then don't forget about fucking Bob Tonyan, dude. Like he is a legitimate pass catcher. So you do have a lot more weapons than you had last year. I think one more to put into the mix would be nice, especially for like injury, right? Like you don't need to have someone's, I mean, who knows? Maybe Bayless takes that next step. I mean, on his 30th birthday, but it's just, it's kind of one of those things where like you have a lot more in the room than the start of last year. Like even with Braxton Jones, you needing him to take a step, like you still have Whitehair, you still have Patrick. And right now it looks like they're probably going to be backups or cut. And in my opinion, like I said, you need to stay at that cap floor. So you might as well keep them around and have them be high priority backups with the kind of dismantlement like you go through. But you shouldn't have to see a player like Sam Mustipher this year, right? Like you shouldn't. Like Zach Thomas is going to be coming back. That's someone we had high hopes for. Doug Kramer is going to be coming back. You have Leatherwood.
I really like Doug Kramer.
Yeah, I don't like him that much. I think he's a fucking Illini center, but it is. I know you're not supposed to judge the helmet, but like undersized, all that shit. Sure, he might be a decent backup, but I just think overall, like the floor of this offense has raised tremendously. Like I don't think there's going to be significant drop-offs the way there were when we saw injuries last year. And the most important thing is getting a full concrete grade on Justin Fields to know like, hey, are we going to use these 2 firsts to go get a veteran quarterback or to go move up or whatever it may be? Or, hey, now we have fucking 2 firsts in the top 15 that we can move up and go get Marvin Harrison Jr. because we're ready to fucking roll, right? Like,
yeah.
So I just feel like you're going to be able to get a legitimate grade. As much as I want them to have a right tackle, and I think they will try to address it in the draft, like you, dude, there's a lot of guys like that are on this below our starting team that like, yeah, there's some question marks, but like Leatherwood was a 1st round pick, bro. You know what I mean? Like, I know he was overdrafted, but like,
I'm just
I'm
not an Alex Leatherwood guy.
I'm very fucking intrigued. That's all I'm gonna say. Like that, but like that's.
I would almost prefer moving Tevin back to right tackle than seeing fucking Alex Leatherwood out there, and then having fucking Nate Davis and Whitehair be your guards.
Whitehair had a rough season last year, man.
He started it strong. Once he got injured, that's where it fell off. But he like those first like 4 games, man. He looked like a fucking
pretty well at the beginning of the season. You're right about that. Yeah, and then you have the Patrick factor, who is dog shit, right? But like, we've seen different levels of dog shit. Like, we're not talking Rashad Coward. Like, we're talking like still players that have started NFL games, right? Like,
man, that's a name I was not trying to hear tonight, but here we are, the fucking converted defensive tackle. I'm surprised Pace never got him a fucking job in Atlanta, or did he? I don't know. I know that
on their squad right fucking now, dude.
I know our boy Jermaine Perfetti is down there now. So,
I mean, right now Jermaine Perfetti is probably better than every right tackle we have on the roster. If you're keeping Jenkins at guard.
All right, that's a good spot to end because that just now we're just counting M&Ms at this point. So, this has been the Barely There Pod. I'm Duke Coughlin. You've been joined by the Ayatollah of Capicola, the Swami of Salami, Lucas Perfetti. You can follow me on Twitter at that pod guy Duke. You can follow him on Twitter at LucasPerfetti46. Sure to subscribe on YouTube. Listen to us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. I hear you can get Google Play out in Egypt. I think Lucas can confirm that for us. But yeah, anywhere you want to listen to it. OAP, I did see your question a little bit earlier. I wanted to save it until the absolute end because it is going to be something for a different one. Duke, you predicted Brisker last year. Who's your guy this year, or is it too soon? It is just a little too soon, but I guarantee you I will have a pretty strong prediction within the next couple weeks. I have a couple of guys in the 2nd and 3rd round that I really like, especially at the defensive end position, that I think that could fall into our fucking laps and be contributors day one. Because I don't think we need to necessarily jump too heavy at getting a legitimate pass rusher as much as we need depth to not be completely getting our dicks kicked in when our starters aren't on the field. But anyway, Unless Lucas has any closing thoughts, this has been Barely There and Bear Down.
Bear down.